Adinpipiyusha Sarva Vedika Sakala Sarva Siddhantaratmadya Sarva Lokaka Jikara Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu Kavidranto Diktitya Sri Krishna Parivartita Paramananda Pataya Vimavasya Parhariyate Sarvasa Sarva Sevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostite Madeka Bandhu Matsangin Madguru Man Mahadana Manistakara Kamal Bhagya Ananamostite Asado Sudattarin Nakti Nichochakaraka Anamutakara Simam Premna Hritkantatayoskura. And all together with the English. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O nectar churned from the ocean of all the Vedic scriptures, O most prominent transcendental fruit of the Vedas, O you who are enriched with the jewels of all the spiritual philosophical conclusions, O you who grant spiritual vision to all the people of the world, O life breath of the Vaishnava devotees. O Lord, you are the sun that has arisen to dispel the darkness of Kali Yuga. You are actually Lord Krishna who has returned among us. O Srimad Bhagavatam, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. By reading you, one attains transcendental bliss, for your syllables rain pure love of God upon the reader. You are always to be served by everyone, for you are the incarnation of Lord Krishna. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O my only friend, O my companion, O my teacher, O my great wealth, O my deliverer, O my good fortune, O my bliss, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O giver of saintliness to the unsaintly, O uplifter of the very fallen, please don't ever leave me. Please become manifest in my heart and my throat, accompanied by pure love of Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. Jai. Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya, His Divine Great Our Lord and Master Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories, all glories, all glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Okay, so I'm glad a few of you are still here, because otherwise we'd be kind of lonely today.
We're glad we're here too for your class.
Huh?
We're glad that we're here for your class.
Well, you'll see after the class. So before all of you came, apparently they were studying this 15th chapter, the Pandavas retire timely, from the first canto. And it's fairly fascinating because it concerns the reaction of the Pandavas after the departure of Lord Krishna. And there's a lot of very profound inquiries based on observation. Yudhishthira's noticing that Arjuna doesn't seem quite the same as when he left. And he starts to probe different questions. And sometimes it takes a while to gather your thoughts and express yourself, even among persons who you completely trust. It's not a trust issue, it's just how do you express yourself under the circumstance. And it kind of seemed that Arjuna was kind of going through this change of gears in his life. So, on this, today is the 9th verse. So, word by word in translation for the synonyms. Yat, whose, Tejasa, by influence. Nirpu, Nirpa Sira Angre. One whose feet are adored by the heads of kings.
One whose feet are adored by the heads of kings.
Ahan, killed. Makha Artam, for the sacrifice. Arya, respectable. Anuja, younger brother. Tava, your. Gaja Ayuta, 10,000 elephants. Sattva Virya, powerful existence. Tena, by him. Artaha, collected. Pramatanata, the Lord of the Ghost. Mahabhirava. Mahaya, for sacrifice. Mupa, kings. Yat Mochita, by whom they were released. Tatanayam, all of them brought. Balim, taxes. Advare, presented. Te, your. Yate Jasanipan Siro Ningrim Mahanma Kartam. Yate Jasanipan Siro Ningrim Mahanma Kartam. Yate jasani pasiro nirgrihim mahanmakarta. Ayo nujastava gajayuta sattva viryaya. Ayo nujastava gajayuta sattva viryaya. Ayo nujastava gajayuta sattva viryaya. Tena hrita pramatanata makaya bupa. Tena hrita pramatanata makaya bupa. Tena hrita pramatanata makaya bupa. Yanmochitastarana yambalimadvarite. Yanmochitastarana yambalimadvarite. Yanmochitastarana yambalimadvarite. Yatse jasanviko siram viram mahan makartam. Ayo nujastava gajayuta sattva viryaha. Tena hrita pramatanata mukaya bupa. Yanmochitastaranyam balimadvarite.
Yate jasa nripashiro nrikam hammakartam.
Yate jasa nripashiro nrikam hammakartam.
Aryo nujasta bhagaja yutta sattva virya.
Aryo nujasta bhagaja yutta sattva virya. Vinarita pramatanata makaya bupa.
Yanmochitastaranyam balim advarete.
Yanmochitastaranyam balim advarete.
Yate jasan ripashiro grim aham makartam.
Yate jasan ripashiro grim aham makartam.
Aryo nujasta bhagajota sattva virya.
Aryo nujasta bhagajota sattva virya.
Tena rita pramatanata makaya bupa.
Tena rita pramatanata makaya bupa.
Yanmochitastaranyam balimadvarete.
Ladies.
Yate jasani pasiram mahammakartam.
Yate jasani pasiram mahammakartam.
Aryo nujasta bhagajauta sattva virya.
Aryo nujasta bhagajauta sattva virya.
Tena rita pramatanata makaya bupa.
Tena rita pramatanata makaya bupa.
Yanmochitastaranyam balam advarete.
Yanmochitastaranyam balam advarete.
Yate jasani pashirom vimaham makartam.
Yate jasani pasirom vimaham makartam.
Aryo nujasta bhagajauta sattva virya.
Aryo nujasta bhagajauta sattva virya.
Tena rita pramatanata makaya bupa.
Tena rita pramatanata makaya bupa.
Yanmochitastaranyam balim advarete.
Yanmochitastaranyam balim advarete.
Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Your respectful younger brother, who possesses the strength of 10,000 20,000 elephants killed by His Grace Jarasandha, whose feet were worshipped by many kings. These kings had been brought for sacrifice in Jarasandha's Mahabharavya Yagya, but they were thus released, and later they paid tribute to your majesty. Purport. Jarasandha was a very powerful king of Magda, and the history of his birth and activities is also very interesting. His father, King Brihadratha, was also a very prosperous and powerful king of Magda, but he had no son, although he married 2 daughters of the king of Kashi. Being disappointed in not getting a son from either of the 2 queens, the king, along with his wives, left home to live in the forest for austerities. But in the forest, he was benedicted by one great rishi to have a son, and he gave him 1 mango to be eaten by the queens. The queens did so, and were very soon pregnant. The king was very happy to see the queens bearing children, but when the ripe time approached, the queens delivered 1 child in 2 parts, 1 from each of the queens' wombs. The 2 parts were thrown in the forest where a great she-demon used to live, and she was glad to have some delicate flesh and blood from the newly born child. Out of curiosity, she joined the 2 parts, and the child became complete and regained life. The she-demon was known as Jara, and being compassionate on the childless king, she went to the king and presented him with the nice child. The king was very pleased with the she-demon and wanted to reward her according to her desire. The she-demon expressed her desire that the child be named after her, and thus the child was surnamed Jarasandha, or one who was joined by Jara, the she-demon. In fact, this Jarasandha was born as one of the parts and parcels of the demon Vripachati. The saint by whose benedictions the queens bore the child was called Chandra Koshika, who foretold of the child before his father Brihadratha. Since Jarasandha possessed demoniac qualities from birth, naturally he became a great devotee of Lord Shiva, the lord of all ghostly and demoniac men. Ravana was a great devotee of Shiva, and so also Jarasandha. He used to sacrifice all arrested kings before Mahabhairava Shiva, and by his military power he defeated many small kings and arrested them to butcher before Mahabhairava. There are many devotees of Lord Mahabhairava, or Kalabhairava, in the forest province of Bihar, formerly called Magda. Jarasandha was a relative of Kamsa, the maternal uncle of Krishna, and therefore, after Kamsa's death, King Jarasandha became a great enemy of Krishna, and there were many fights between Jarasandha and Krishna. Lord Krishna wanted to kill him, but he also wanted that those who served as military men for Jarasandha might not be killed. Therefore, a plan was adopted to kill him. Krishna, Bhima, and Arjuna together went to Jarasandha in the dress of poor brahmanas and begged charity from King Jarasandha. Jarasandha never refused charity to any brahmana, and he performed many sacrifices also, yet he was not on par with devotional service. Lord Krishna, Bhima, and Arjuna asked Jarasandha for the facility of fighting with him, and it was settled that Jarasandha would fight with Bhima only. So all of them were both guests and combatants of Jarasandha. And Bhima and Jarasandha fought every day for several days. Bhima became disappointed, but Krishna gave him hints about Jarasandha's being joined together as an infant, and thus Bhima dissected him again and so killed him. All the kings who were detained in the concentration camp to be killed before Mahabharata were thus released by Bhima. Feeling thus obligated to the Pandavas, they paid tribute to King Yudhisthira. Okay, repeat. Your respectable younger brother, who possesses the strength of 10,000 elephants, killed by his grace Jarasandha, whose feet were worshipped by many kings. These kings had been brought for sacrifice in Jarasandha's Mahabharata Yajna. But they were thus released. Later, they paid tribute to your majesty. Om Agninatvarundasya Sanana Sakaya Chakchu Militamina Tasmi Sri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prasarane Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Vaskasya Satarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Hare Hare. So, this is just a very short synopsis of one of the amazing stories where there's a great demon with an interesting background. A childless king has two queens, disappointed because there's no heir apparent. Goes to the forest with the queens to perform austerity, meets a sage, laments to the sage what his problem is, no son, no problem. He gives the king some mangoes and say, a mango would say, give it to the queen, so the mango split, and each queen eats part of the mango, and then they become pregnant. And then at the time of birth, each one only had half a child. So it didn't even look like there was any life in these, so they were tossed in the forest. And interestingly enough, the person who discovered them was a demoness, who was a flesh-eating demoness, and was attracted by the apparent tender young flesh until she saw, wow, there were two parts, this is interesting. And she just thought, let me see what happens here. And she put them together, just how is it going to fit? And the child actually became whole, the two portions came together, the child became whole. And then she had some compassion on the childless king, considering what he'd gone through. And so she presented the child. And she could have asked for, she asked for something. She could have asked for so many things. But she expressed her desire that the child be named after her. So then he became Jarasandha, born as one of the parts and parcels of this demon Viprachati. So Jarasandha had demoniac qualities from birth. So it says so naturally he gravitated towards Lord Shiva. Not indicating that Shiva is demoniac, just that he has a lot of compassion for people who walk on the edge, ghostly, haunted persons, and people with questionable motives, but known as santosh, one who's easily satisfied. So then these type of people, they gravitate towards him in order to get their lesser desires fulfilled. So in the beginning of the chapter, Arjuna, he was in front of Yudhisthira, and Yudhisthira, as I mentioned, he was starting to question him. And it was said that with great difficulty, because then he started remembering the whole scene, he checked the tears of grief that smeared his eyes. He was very distressed because Lord Krishna was out of his sight, and he increasingly felt affection for him. So Arjuna had a very high-level relationship with Lord Krishna as a friend. Sometimes, in spite of being told by Srila Prabhupada, it doesn't matter which one of the rasas, they're all equally satisfying to the participant in that particular ras. And there's no lacking, because some people it's only got to be Madhurya ras, Rasika ras, otherwise there's nothing happening much. But we can see that in the perfectional stages of each and every one of these rasas, the primary ingredient that fuels on the Madhurya ras, which is that separation, reunion separation, is present. And the symptoms are similarly present. If you read some of the exchanges between Radharani and the gopis, Radha and Krishna, and there is just so much emotion and feeling, particularly when Krishna disappears and Radharani dries up like a leaf and just faints, almost as if dead. But it's all fueled by affection, by love. And in the same way, Arjuna, he was really distressed because Krishna was out of sight. And that separation brought on further and deeper feelings of affection. So it's said in the purport to the fourth verse that Sri Arjuna is one of the typical pure devotees of the Lord, reciprocating in the fraternal relationship. And the Lord's dealings with Arjuna are displays of friendship of the highest order. He was not only a well-wisher of Arjuna, but he was actually a benefactor. And this explained in the Bhagavad Gita in the 10th chapter. The Lord says that anyone who's specifically powerful and opulent in wealth, strength, beauty, knowledge, and all that is materially desirable is to be considered but a product of the insignificant portion of the complete whole of my energy. So therefore, nobody can actually be powerful with any measure without being endowed by the Lord. So when the Lord descends on the earth, he comes with his eternal entourage, ever liberated associates. And he not only displays the divine energy possessed by himself, but he also empowers his associates with the required energy to execute the mission of the particular incarnation. So the power and the energy that were bestowed upon Arjuna were required for the fulfillment of the mission of the Lord of that particular time. But when the mission was fulfilled, when it was finished, Prabhupada described, these emergency powers were withdrawn from Arjuna because these astounding powers, because you remember, he was just an amazing Maharata. He could fight innumerable persons at one moment, being attacked from the front, the back, the side, and he could deal with all of it. So even these powers are astonishing, even to the denizens of heaven. But now they were no longer required. And Prabhupada commented, they were not meant for going back home, back to Godhead. So the mission had been fulfilled, now in shifting gears into another. And Arjuna commented, I've just lost him, whose separation for a moment would render all the universes unfavorable and void, like bodies without life. So we can see these different rasas are equally deep in their relationship with the Lord, so that there's no lacking on any one of them. The persons who are associated with that particular relationship with the Lord are perfectly satisfied with that relationship. And if there's some disruption, then these deep feelings of separation manifest, just as we saw between Radha and Krishna. So later on it explains how Arjuna's constant remembrance of the Lord's lotus feet rapidly increased his devotion, and as a result, all the trash in his thoughts subsided. I always found that like such an interesting use of that word, and this is part of the translation, all the trash in his thoughts. So then, in the purport, Prabhupada explains how the material desires in the mind are the trash of material contamination. And by such contamination, the living entity is faced with so many compatible and incompatible situations that discourage the very existence of spiritual identity. So then Arjuna commented how he was attracted to these instructions imparted to him by the personality of Godhead, Govinda, because they were impregnated with instructions for relieving the burning heart in all circumstances of time and space. And this is a direct reference to the Bhagavad Gita, to the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, which were imparted to him by the Lord on the battlefield. So when the Lord left, he left behind. It's explained that saintly persons, when they depart from the material world, they will go up to the shore and they'll leave behind the means by which others can cross the ocean of nescience. So Krishna left behind the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, not only for the benefit of Arjuna, but also for all time and all lands. And Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all Vedic wisdom. So in this wonderful story of Jarasandha, I'll just mention that when I was in India, right after the GBC meeting, which was held in Tirupati, I went to Bombay. Actually, there had been a tour of the South Indian Nrsingadev temples lined up. Immediately after the GBC meeting, there was a guide, there was transportation, whole show was ready to go. And I found out that there was going to be a drama festival in Mumbai by the Chopati temple. And I haven't, this is like annual event. And they're just really astoundingly well done. And I started thinking, wow, okay, I could go see some old ancient rock structures and some ancient deities. Or I could go see the pages of the Bhagavatam brought to life, which is how Prabhupada described these dramas. These dramas bring the pages of the Bhagavatam to life and associate with wonderful devotees. So overnight shift gears and ended up in Bombay. So one of the dramas, there was two on Friday and 2 on Saturday. And one of them was about Jarasandha. And they have, has anybody here ever gone to any of the drama festivals? No? How long ago?
Oh, 18 years ago.
Yeah. So I'm telling you, I've gone for quite a number of years, and yeah, there's Sukava Devi, she's been, but the level of super excellence has just increased. They've become so expert in presenting these dramas, and they've learned, they have learned how to deal with the lighting and with light effects and the sound engineering. I mean, it's quite amazing how expert they've become. And they used to have these really incredible painted backdrops, and they would very expertly change them in between scenes with the lights going down a little bit, then they'd come on and it was a whole different scene, and now they're using a combination of some painted ones, but mostly by using digital projections, which they have themselves put together. They don't source it out. And a lot of them are put on by leading ladies of the congregation. I don't know if any of you remember Dr. Dorothy and his wife. So she's one of the powerhouses behind the dramas. And you're just sitting there, and you're just totally part of what's going on, watching it, And so in the scene with this child came about, and then the enmity between Krishna and Jarasandha, they would fight, but they could go on for days and days, and there wouldn't be a conclusion, because Krishna could have killed him, but he didn't want to be the one to kill him. So then when it finally became clear that he really had to taken out of the way, a plan was devised that Krishna, Bhima, and Arjuna would dress up like brahmanas, because Jarasandha had this thing about not being able to refuse a brahmana's request. So they came dressed as brahmanas, and they were immediately received. And you could kind of tell they were kind of strongly built for brahmanas, but, and they said, what would you like? I said, well, we'd like to fight with you. He's looking at them. Krishna, Arjuna, Bhima, who was a more strong. So he said, all right, I'll fight with this one. But he disclosed that he didn't believe they were actually brahmanas. So then they disclosed their identity. Krishna, Arjuna, Bhima. And if you're a fighter, a warrior, you get kind of excited by meeting a worthy opponent. So, there was the two of them, Bhima and Jarasandha, were the opponents. And they went on, and they just couldn't end it, And they would fight, the codes were in that day, sun up to sundown. So at the end of the day, they were both exhausted. Neither one had won. And so a certain level of frustration was mounting. And Krishna finally decided to give a hint to Jarasandha, but to Bhima. he held up a twig and a little branch, you know, how twigs can be, two parts kind of. He held it up and he pulled it apart. And he threw one part in one direction and he threw the other part in another direction. So Bhima got it. You know, he got the point. And you know, when you get a certain, we might call it an adrenaline rush, you know, suddenly you get charged with a certain energy that kind of pulls you a little bit over and beyond your normal state of energy. So when he got that hint, you can imagine he was, because up until then it had just been a draw. He couldn't get on top, you know, neither one could get over the other one, but now he had a hint, and it gave him that surge that he needed to tackle him and then just pull him apart. He threw one part and threw the other part. Now in the drama, I'm not sure if this was embellishment or, you know, but in the drama, so some of the demons grabbed the one part and some of the demons grabbed the other part and they rushed together and they put it together and suddenly there he was again. So this went on for a few times before finally threw it really far, finished, you know. It was the inglorious but glorious end of Jarasandha. But nobody can actually accomplish anything without the sanction of the Supreme Lord. And this was Arjuna's greatest understanding, greatest realization, although he had come to accept Krishna, his friend, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as his teacher, as his guru. It was completely dependent on his presence for his supernatural powers and ability. And just like when Srila Prabhupada was present, many of us did things that we normally wouldn't or couldn't have done just by his empowerment. The empowerment wasn't like he handed us anything. He just expressed a desire for something. Shamsundar, can you carve? Large size, asking him to carve Jagannath. Oh, maybe Malati and Shamsundar can adopt her. This was like when we were, I was pregnant, so I was like 22, husband was about 24, and there was a 16-year-old girl whose brother had joined the temple, and the mother was very harsh with this daughter. What had happened at birth, the mother didn't want the child. And fortunately, in those days, getting a divorce was quite difficult, so she didn't do that. Instead, she went to the hospital, delivered the child, and walked out, leaving the baby in the hospital. So, you know, it was kind of like that through her life, very awkward situation. So now her brother had asked Srila Prabhupada, is there something that could be done for Sarah? Her name was Sarah. Prabhupada looks at us. Well, perhaps Malati and Shamsundar can adopt her. I didn't think twice. I didn't think, how could that be? I'm only 22. It was just like, okay. Next day I went down to the courthouse, very confidently filled out the papers, got a court date. And then we had to go, myself and Shamsundar, the girl, the mother, the father. And we went before the judge. It was a lady judge, and one by one, each of us was called into the back chamber, and we were interviewed. And then she's in there, she's deliberating, and she comes out, and she looks at everybody, and she goes, well, it may seem a little strange that the mother's only 22 and the daughter's 16, but I award custody to this couple. And that was it, you know. That was Prabhupada's empowerment. The fact that we could go to England like we did with this, I mean, really all we had was this idea, meet the Beatles and get them to chant. We didn't have much beyond that. you know. I mean, you could say nowadays in our modern lingo, that was our strategic plan. And when we got there, we had all kinds of little strategic plans to catch the attention. But we hadn't sat together and, you know, had meeting after meeting and volume after volume of paper with all the details and everything. We just like, let's go meet the Beatles and, you know. Prabhupada asked Mukunda, what do you think about Shyam Sundar's idea to meet the Beatles? It was like, Mukunda kind of was a little bit nonchalant. Well, it just might work. That's all Prabhupada needed was a little encouragement. It just might work. Okay, go. And then eventually we all went, you know. But what were the chances, you know, without being empowered by the pure devotee? There was very little chance because there were so many people wanting to meet the Beatles. You know. But by the mercy of the pure devotee and the Lord, who is a constant companion of the pure devotee, these things could happen. Just wanted to, I'll end with a little, what's the word? Well, let's say you're having trouble in your spiritual life. And the trouble is generally the challenge of sense gratification. That's, you know, what brings on the troubles on one level or the other. So Prabhupada said, here's a test of advancement, that the spirit of sense enjoyment is reduced. Like diminishing fever means that disease is getting cured. So then Prabhupada said, so you may be thinking, yeah, well, I'm chanting and it's not reducing. So Prabhupada said, if it's not reducing, chant 64 rounds instead of 16. This is the only remedy, but determination is required. Divine grace to Prabhupada. And if anybody, I mean, now class time officially over, anybody's ready, can like go, or if anybody wants to comment or have something. Give another class.
Hare Krishna, thank you. So we were hearing about how Arjuna was empowered when Krishna was here, but as soon as Krishna left, then he
withdrew all of his, yeah.
So then, and then you were talking about how in Prabhupada's presence you all felt so empowered that you could do things that you never imagined that you could do. But when Prabhupada left, did that empowerment continue, or did you feel like a little weakened? And is that
Depending on the individual. Some people powered on, they were empowered, and they remained so. But as is also known, others, including some of those who powered on, eventually many of them fell down. The reason for falling down is given by Srila Prabhupada. I mean, there's only one reason, spiritual weakness. You know, it's just like every once in a while I'll fill the tank of my car up. And I've got a full tank, you know. But if you don't remember to refill it, one day you're just not going to be going anywhere, you know. So if we're not consistent with our sadhana and our spiritual practice, that spiritual strength and energy that comes along with that will ebb. It will. You'll become weaker. So Prabhupada commented that in that same way, that if we're not consistent in our sadhana, hearing, reading, chanting, etc., that we'll actually become weak and fall back into unwanted habits. You know, most people, they were mentioning yesterday how when Srila Bhakti True Maharaj was given sannyas and how some of the God brothers were concerned about that. And Prabhupada said, They were concerned because he was relatively new. He just joined in 76. Now in 77, he got first and second. Now he was going to get sannyas. And a little worried, maybe that's a little too fast. You know? Prabhupada said, don't worry, if he falls down, it will be to the mode of goodness. You know? But most of us can't make that claim. You know? So we need to be diligent. I know. We need to be diligent. Good association, not just associating with devotees, but devotees who are tangibly and actively engaged in devotional service. This is a instruction from the 3rd canto, 25th chapter, verse 25. You know, so he's speaking about, yes, this association of devotees is absolutely essential, but not just, you know, devotees who are engaged in devotional service.
Did Jarasandha fall to the mode of goodness? He was worshipping the Brahmas.
I think, I don't actually know. What is this? Well, one thing is that he was killed in Krishna's presence, which guaranteed him a certain level of liberation. Just like everyone on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. They got some form of liberation. But for the devotees, that's not our attraction. You know, we want Krishna's service.
I just have a follow-up question from my previous question. Did you say that Srila Prabhupada's empowerment is just as much available to us now as it was when he was present?
If you want it, yes. Because in my own life, I have received very direct instructions from Srila Prabhupada. One such instruction happened right in this temple room, actually. And very clearly spoke to me what I should do. And he ended up by saying, don't leave. No. But we have to make ourselves available. You know, not every single one, I mentioned, I think this the other day, that not every single one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples saw him. Not everyone had a personal exchange with him, so-called. Yeah. And yet, some of those same devotees are still strongly rooted in practicing Krishna consciousness and serving Prabhupada's mission. You know. So it's up to us to, you know, find out where your relationship lies, develop it, and just on a practical level, in addition to reading the books of knowledge given by him, read the books written about him by his disciples, watch the various videos like the ones from the Memories of Srila Prabhupada by Siddhanta series. These are memories coming from the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And then Yadubhara's on Following Srila Prabhupada, which is a chronological order video series. Then there's conversations, these are taped, and there's these morning walk conversations also. And they're actually really, really full of nectar because the morning walks are generally Prabhupada and his close confidants, those who are actively helping push on this movement. So he would be sometimes challenging them to see how they would respond to certain, you know, possible encounters. And they would be asking him questions. You know. And of course there's the letters, which sometimes you have to be a little careful in that you don't know what he's actually replying to. So then, maybe the reply that you're reading is something very specific or not, and we don't know about, we might not always know. But these are ways to become acquainted with Srila Prabhupada. And attending Guru Puja, whether it's in the temple or like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, just had his Grihastha disciples to have a picture and offer incense, a lamp, a flower. There's one wonderful picture of Srila Prabhupada, and he's kind of bent over. It's in India, and he's like bent over, and he's offering to a picture of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. So to keep the memory and the relationship fresh, to keep developing. And I've seen people, especially here in New Vrindaban, because of the palace, people go and they meet Prabhupada through the wonderful tour. And has everybody here taken the tour of the palace? Should, catch that, because it's not just, there's a little bit of historic information also, this marble, 7 different types, and all the chandeliers, yada yada, but there's so many wonderful interactions about Srila Prabhupada. And people come out of that and they're just like, they've gotten more than just a tour of a building. They've gotten to know Srila Prabhupada. I remember one time a gentleman came down here, and I saw him out front, and I said, would you like to come in? He goes, yes, I would. I heard about your founder up there, and I'm really curious to see, what's transpired here. I remember him standing in front of Prabhupada, and he actually was folded his hands and was kind of just looking at him. And when he came, he had tears in his eyes, and he said, I'm a Christian, but I have felt the presence of Christ more than I ever have being here today in front of him. That was, really wonderful. But many examples like that are there. Just inexplicably, people feel the connection. Even the lady who temporarily stole his shoes. A couple of times, some lady came up and stole Prabhupada's shoes from the palace. Now they're in a little, what do you call it? Display, a display thing. And nobody knew what had happened. And then one day this lady comes back, she has Prabhupada's shoes, and he said, he told her to take them. He's telling the story. He said he told me to take them. I didn't know what for or why, but he wanted me to take those shoes, so I took them. But now he said it's time to bring them back, so here they are. Is that right? Yeah.
That's when all the crazy stuff was going on.
Yeah.
Deviations.
Crazy stuff.
But we shouldn't try to, take empowerment cheaply. Then it's not empowerment. Empowerment is when you actually are doing something in line with serving Krishna, his devotees, the mission, not to cement your own position. Our position always is the same. Dasana, dasana, dasana. That's our eternal position, and the one that makes us the most happy when we're actually engaged in that service. So if we get a little to our head, or finding ourselves being able to do certain things, I could give examples of my own life, and I was thinking, well, I'm getting away with this, and nothing happened. But it never lasts long, and Krishna just can flatten you very quickly, which is his mercy if you catch it that way, to straighten up. But sometimes the living entities are so foolish that we get that mercy and just stupidly march on in the other direction. So the empowerment being referred to by me is that empowerment enables us to perform some wonderful service on behalf of Prabhupada and his mission. Just just like Srila Prabhupada was empowered by the Supreme Lord to do a particular mission on his behalf and accomplish something that no one else had done, which was spread the Sankirtan movement outside of the boundaries of India. And he did that. But he couldn't have done it had he not been empowered by Lord Krishna. You know.
Can I ask one last question? Actually, two questions. We have heard so much about your good self and Shastra Prabhu. What about little Saraswati? I've never heard again about her. Your daughter, Saraswati?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're asking?
Yeah, where is she now?
She lives about 22 miles northwest of Chicago.
Okay. Yeah. And I want to ask, like, what was it like when you were there with Srila Prabhupada, and you were carrying on your activities? Were you having the feeling, well, just like a little child holds onto his father's hand that, oh, you know, I'm very confident because Prabhupada is here, or were you carrying on just like
I wasn't thinking in that mood, actually. We had a mission, even in San Francisco, we had the mission to establish that little center. And then, of course, we went to England. After that, we were sent to India. And we were just marching to the tune of Srila Prabhupada's request. And I wasn't really analyzing it. I was just trying to keep up with it.
Thank you, Malati, for your class, and also for your amazing disappearance day talk. Thank you very much for that. I wanted to ask you about something that was touched upon in yesterday's class in terms of the goal. It seems that there are two levels of goal setting for a devotee. One is missionary driven in terms of the mission. And this is kind of the one that Swami chose to speak on yesterday, every town and village. But it seems that there's also a need, an equal need, or maybe even a greater need, to have a personal mission in terms of attaining the goal of our sadhana, which is not every town and village. The goal of our sadhana is to attain a level of devotion, love, prema bhakti, whatever you want.
But that doesn't exclude every town and village, because you're going to be living somewhere in some town or some village. So, you know.
Of course, what I'm saying that if we don't equally emphasize the personal spiritual attainment that we're trying to achieve, then the external achievements have value because they're pleasing to Srila Prabhupada. But ultimately, the most pleasing thing to Srila Prabhupada was what she said in Atlanta when asked, when all the book distributors in Radha Damodar party were there, and they one devotee asked Prabhupada, what is the most pleasing service? What is the most greatest service we can do for you? And everyone was saying, I was going to say, it's true, but simply loving Krishna. If you love Krishna. So can you speak on that?
I mean, if we don't have some concept of our advancement or lack of it, can be either way. It means having some self-awareness. We need that. And probably there was a lot of disasters from the early ages, even up maybe to current, when people get swept up with, you're calling the goal of the mission, but aren't keeping in touch with themselves. But Prabhupada mentioned that from day one. He gave different examples. One is like flying your own plane. You know, we're together. All the planes are up there, but each pilot has to fly his own plane. So it means each person has to be aware of where they are, where they're going, and how they're getting there. You know. So I think that would touch upon what you're getting at, is that we can't dismiss either side of the equation. They're both there. But the importance of, we call it self-realization, we get our knowledge through Srila Prabhupada, and he's given us the progress of how to progress, etc. And I don't see where he's ever said to ignore our personal progress in favor of the mission, although there are certainly times when the mission takes precedent. When we were in UK, if we started getting too much into our personal situation, I think we would have been flattened, because it was such a, unstable situation. But we stuck together we were clear about the mission, why we were there, and the result was that we did accomplish the mission, and somehow or other, all of our relationships remained intact, and somehow or other, we were allowed to continue in our Krishna consciousness. And I remember, we didn't think a whole lot, some people did, but not everybody thought a whole lot about advancement in the early days. But I remember one time when Srila Prabhupada commented about Jamuna, that she was feeling bhava. She was feeling bhava. She was feeling bhava, some spiritual emotions. But it's kind of like when you're talking to a child in a language that's a little above their head, they'll catch parts of it, but So we were like, didn't know what that was exactly, but Jamuna had it. But Jamuna was one of these rare individuals who had a taste for chanting. And like when we went to the UK, for example, each one of us it wasn't that we sat down, okay, Malati, this is your part, We instinctively knew our own strengths and weaknesses and how it would fit in to, keep the ship afloat, even though it was kind of a fractured ship, some of us here, some of us there. But Jamuna she was our spiritual anchor. Even there's a letter from Prabhupada letters to Guru Das. But it was when they were in Vrindaban, first working on Krishna Balaram Mandir. And, no, they hadn't got to Vrindaban yet. Yeah, what happened, they had then gone on up north in India, to Gratpur, and they were coming back to Bombay. And Prabhupada was on the train also. And when they stopped at Delhi, it was one of these, how they'll make these quick stops. So this one was a little longer, it was a 20-minute stop. But the devotees were going on to Bombay. But this man jumps on the train and he comes to Prabhupada and he just said, we want you to please come to Delhi, people want to meet you, and we'll do And Prabhupada said, but I have some engagements in Bombay. So he looks at Jamuna and Guru Das, okay, you can get down and see if you can do something here. And then he says to Giriraj Brahmachari at the time, and what's his name? South Indian Swami Manu, not Manu. Krishna. Huh? No, he translates so many books. He's Banu Maharaj. But he wasn't Banu Maharaj at that time. So that was the four of them. off the train. And 2 minutes, suddenly you're from your ideal shelter, you're on the train platform, and the train is pulling away, and you're there on the train platform with, we only used to just carry like one little suitcase and a little shoulder bag and our bead bags, that was it, And the train was going away with Prabhupada on it, and they're just there on the platform with some man who they didn't know, Do something here, Even one time when Shamsundar, myself, and our kid so we were in Bombay, and we got called, we meaning our little group, because we didn't go we went to India, and we didn't just go here and there, okay, let's go here, let's go. We only went where we had an engagement, or where Srila Prabhupada directed us. We weren't doing tourism in those days. So we're being sent somewhere, the group of us, and then suddenly Prabhupada says, well, Shamsundar, I think you can stay. We're there at the train station with them. I think you can stay. You can. This is Bombay. We had the Kash Ganga building. You can stay. you can be temple president. Shift gears.